Yes.
All right. Welcome, everyone. This is the second Mengzi lecture. I practice my Chinese, and as usual, it starts with a lecture where people, our guests, in this case we have two, are introducing their interests, their main research focus, and so forth and so on. And in the second part, we again have a little discussion that opens the whole topic, we feel that these two guests are particularly interesting for this kind of second discussion. Again, we will publish both of these things in Chinese and non-Chinese outlets, as we did before. So, our first guest is Ramesh Kumar Mishra from Hyderabad, from India. And he's heading the Center for Neural and Cognitive Sciences of the University of Hyderabad, which, according to my assessment, has the most land that I have ever seen. So they have an enormous area with many wild animals on it, and you can really lose your way there. So that was very impressive. But anyway, he knows how to find his center, of course. He's a particularly active colleague. So he's very busy, not just feeling busy, but he does many things. So he writes many books and edits many books. His last one is telling us something already why we invited him. That is on cognitive sciences, new developments and future directions. And this is what we are particularly interested in. We will be coming back to this in the general discussion. He's also editor-in-chief of the International Journal of Cultural Cognition Sciences. Is that the right? I just abbreviated that and forgot how I did that. That's also reflecting a little bit about our topic, namely, what does it mean that more and more cultures are involved, more and more countries from different cultures are involved in the general global scientific endeavor? Does that have any implications, or is that just going the same way? Now, he's also, he heavily toured the world, I would say, scientifically. Personally, I don't know, but scientifically, certainly. He has worked in Norway, Canada, Tehran, Delhi, so Iran and India before, in the Netherlands and in the UK. And then you will not be surprised that he's particularly interested in bilingualism, so in people who can speak more than one language, and not at the same time, but sometimes there may be even cognitive processes that run at the same time. So all his topics are more or less directly related to language, but he kind of circulates, he expands this area to many other domains like vision, attention, cognitive control, or culture, and tries to kind of explore the overlap between these areas, and some of his books and papers are about this issue. He does that at a behavioral level, so running experiments, but also doing neuroscientific investigations, which I think also fits with the way we see, we look at science and cognitive control aspects here in this institute. He organizes workshops, lecture series. I was invited there. He's very active in, let's say, making science visible. And this is also not only about him, but also about our second speaker, which I will introduce later. So it is a lot of this is about the connection between science and the real world, which is not always as tight as one may want, but these people are working on this. So what I cannot read my writing. Particularly interesting is he, according to my assessment, is mentally very busy with what it means to be a scientist in India and in other new kids on the block, I would say. So countries that so far did not yet, of course, every country has a long scientific history in their own history, but that is often unknown to others. So they did not contribute to the global science endeavor. But now this is changing. Many new countries are on the block. China is certainly one. India is another one. In Asia, there are many new players. And the question is, what does that mean? Is that just more people? That could be. But it may be that they have slightly different interests, slightly different motivations, slightly different theoretical concepts, slightly different goals in science. And this is what we want, what we are interested in this whole lecture series. And that's why I'm happy to have you here, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Bernard. Thank you, Lorenza. I am very humbled with the extensive introduction that Bernard gave this morning. I'm very pleased to be here, and I was looking forward to this visit for a long time, since the time Bernard and Lorenza visited the University of Hyderabad. So I thank both of them for this kind invitation, and I also I'm very happy to see many PhD students, master students here this morning. It's a fantastic place. China, and particularly Jinan. As you look around, you will see, one sees the progress and the busyness of the city. And I just saw the university is pretty as well when we entered. So Bernard is a legend in the field, and Lorenza as well, and I don't have big words to tell their influence in the field, and many of you would have already been experiencing in research, and I heard what new laboratories and new ideas you are pursuing here, and I'm very happy to see a very fantastic building, the infrastructure. Today I will try to give an introduction to some ideas that have occupied me for some time. I won't get into the details of the analytical parts of it, but if you will be interested, you can write to me later and we can discuss certain aspects of research, but I will try to also give you some ideas. As Bernard already referred, that each country pursues psychology, cognitive science, which is a new science, but psychology, neuroscience, differently, according to their needs. And I am a believer in the fact that a people's need or a country's need is paramount when you think of the research topics that can occupy you, because it is so labor, money intensive. And India is at a crossroad, just like China. And we are very similar in our aspirations, so psychology or any such interdisciplinary science is not standing outside this aspiration. So it reflects in my choice of research topics, as he referred bilingualism. I also have been studying the cognition, I will define it, in people with no literacy, without formal literacy. So what happens to their cognition, I have been examining with colleagues from Europe and also from India, and I am heavily invested in that kind of research, which Benaifor will later discuss. So my choice of research topic is triggered by the problems of my country. This is my first, it might have happened unconsciously many years ago, but now I am conscious why I was choosing those things. I now have an answer, because 10-15 years ago, when I was beginning in Allahabad as a historical city in the central India, Allahabad, I didn't know why I am studying bilinguals or illiterates, because somebody would, when I would give talks in Europe, they would say, is this not, what is, everybody is multilingual in India. Illiterates are too many in India. Why are you studying? You study. So I have no answer, except that maybe I was mimicking some of the researchers I was trying to look at. But then this became a reality. So I got grants, I developed contacts. So what has been my my motive is to study cognition in diverse populations that have not been looked at closely by psychologists. Although India has a history of psychology that dates back to decades, even to the pre-independence era. And India has 1,500 universities where you have psychology in almost in all universities. And cognitive science or neuroscience are new subjects, maybe 10, 15 years old, not long. So when I started research, cognitive science was just a new name, but psychologists, computer scientists, neurologists, linguists were interested in taking up this subject. So I was surrounded by people who had expertise in these fields, but they were not cognitive scientists. But I began teaching cognitive science as such to masters and PhD students as a discipline. So I trained as a linguist, psycholinguist, but I have never taught and researched in a linguistics department. So I have only faint remembrance of the classical linguistics, but I have been studying language. So this is a dichotomy in my feeling towards language. So I look at it from a cognitive science point of view, but many of my colleagues in India, they look at it more from its structure, description of language, etc., which are very important as well. So today, my topic is studying cognition in a world that in transit. It's a metaphor for the movement we are a party to. Now we are moving somewhere, we don't know, but maybe good or bad. So we have to be aware of this transition. Each country is in a transition now. And disciplines like psychology actually are more responsible because they deal with human beings more directly, like psychology. So I won't define it for you. You are aware that psychology's history as a scientific discipline dates back to at least 150 years. But today, psychology is more contributing than before because it is tackling applied problems. We'll come to that, some of the problems, like the problem of literacy, mental health, bi-multilingualism, technology's influence, some of these problems. So I am fine if you ask me or you raise your hand, I did not get it, I'll just stop and tell you. So there's no need to worry if you don't get any plots or something, and we will have time to discuss. And yeah. As one referred, my book that I wrote 2 years ago was New Directions in Cognitive Science. So I wanted to speculate what are the topics that people are going to be interested in next 10 years. So I can see that some of those topics are being played out and people are doing research like mental health and AI and the impact of virtual reality and so on and so forth. But from Indian perspective, there is not much because India is still caught up with the classical style of doing natural science and engineering and medicine, but there is lack of integration, which I will refer to later. But we are coming up. We are beginning to talk, etc. And diversity is a theme now I have picked up as a problem area, not as a metaphor for being romantic about varieties of people. We always have been varieties of people, but as a scientific problem. So what can we really do about it? So we will try to be a bit frank about the nature of diversity, as what psychologists can, meaningfully can they contribute to diversity, or it's as romantic as for a sociologist or political scientist. So which I think should be a bit different, the psychologist's take on the nature of diversity, because language, literacy, religion, all kinds of belief systems come in there. It's become very complicated. Now, William James, you may know, was or is considered very significant for psychology. William James was a mystic, as a spiritualist, apart from being also to some extent he trained as a medical doctor, but he left it. As I am beginning to read James more carefully, I think some of his ideas are very vital now. Because psychology was never designed to be a reductionist material science. Psychology had to explain all the varieties of feelings, emotions, complexities that humans feel. And James held that view, which are coming back now. So it's not to explain your brain activity, but to explain you in totality. Anything that is happening in our psychology's business is to explain. There may be whatever. So James was very influential, and introspection methods are coming back now because we are asking reports, we are asking feedbacks, from the participants. We are taking subjective. I have started using some apps like continuous assessment of mood, and we are beginning to also correlate those data with the experimental data because so Jamesian psychology is back in some sense, and I think Bernard also wrote on many occasions from a different perspective, the sensory motor activation. I think more recently I read James said that you are sad because you are crying. So which means if you cry, you experience sadness more acutely. If you don't cry, so he had a good amount of idea about human beings because he himself suffered a lot. So I think our individual personalities also shape what we write and speak. And this is nothing new, this slide. We know this tug of war, that here also we have a brain that we have to study materially. We have to explain the networks. We have to explain the connections. That's neuroscience's job. But we have to have psychology somewhere here. So how feelings, language, motivations emerge is still mystery. But there are two views. One is that maybe the psychological state is emergent or starting a property of the brain. Or the other view is that there is no relationship because we don't find that in clinical setups. People's brains are perfectly fine, but they have problems, or vice versa. So neuroscience has not, neuroscience has done its job, but psychologists have to integrate neuroscientific findings. And there is a lot of activity. I was participating in longitudinal studies of brain imaging, which but we have to be more careful when we try to interpret brain data in psychological terms. Like, you cannot just be so confident that brain activity and psychological states are similar. So we are still in the old tug of war, in the 60s tug of war. We have not come out of it. My field is cognitive science. Now I define cognitive science as a multidisciplinary field where you try to study totality of human experience, mental states, psychologies, pathologies, behavior, including many tools, ideas, frameworks. They may be from biology, from computer science, from mathematics, from psychology, and even from humanities and social sciences. So like in our university, we have School of Medical Science, which hosts cognitive science, which also has psychology, health psychology. So we are integrated to professionals who are studying different aspects of behavior. And they are framing also policies for the emergent problems. Like we had aftermath of COVID, so lots of people had psychological issues, so including malnutrition and the impact on mental health in children and various kinds of things we study. I don't study, but my colleagues in the school have research projects. So I am beginning to define cognition not as intelligent behavior. That's what you see in textbook. Like we human beings have this intelligent behavior, but I think every organism is intelligent from its own point of view. So what cognition probably, that's a very strong view. As if people that don't have intelligent behavior are not cognitive. So my way of describing cognition is an adaptive mechanism for every organism that allows the organism to deal with challenges of the environment in the best way possible. From somebody's point of view, it is intelligent or not is an irrelevant thing. Why this is important? Because when people don't do very well in the tasks, so we discard them. Like we only take people that are above 80% accuracy. So all the other people that are not so fast in computers, they're judged as okay, but they're as good in many aspects of life. So we have to have a different definition that they're adopting differently. So it's the diversity argument, and adopting is probably a better way to talk about cognition, because you can do it in right hand, I can do it in left hand. How we deal with the problem is our own business. So there can be one definition that fast, sharp, intelligent behavior is cognition, and which we measure in tasks, like many of you may be doing tasks. So I'm beginning to think how to enlarge the scope of these tasks or modify them in order to explain. Also slowness, also inaccuracy, because lots of people have that. And it's also a bit cultural. Like most cultures are different, how they view speed and accuracy. And now in the times of technological advancement, I think we are fine without being very fast and accurate, because they are taken over by the algorithms. What are we left to do then? So there is a broad question attached to the definition of cognition and cognitive science. The classical definition is it is a computational, the mind is computational, there is a computer in the mind, but it is slowly disappearing. Other frameworks are coming, embodiment and more extended views, and both Lorenz and Bernard have contributed to those views more than the classical side. Bernard particularly has written many papers. I mean, there are too many, but some are provocative, and I often read. I read few people, but I read very deeply those few. So he is one of them. One of his paper was about attention and what it is, whether there is such a thing. You should read that paper. So it's an adaptive strategy, and adaptive strategy is how best I am solving the problem that currently I am facing in the environment. As simple as that. Like if there would be a fire alarm, then we all will have to exit. And those who have not taken note of the environment, where is the exit, would have some problem. It's an adaptive strategy. There's nothing more to cognition. So this way simplifies, and you can explain a wide range of problems in society, rather than selectively studying some people and their brains. It's a tool. Like you have hands and legs. Even if there is something called mind, it's a tool. How best we use the tool is based on our training. So schooling, education, culture, religions, belief structures, they are all helping us to sharpen this tool. And different cultures help us differently. So this is a tool, and literacy and education are important training grounds for this tool. So we have so many studies that people that have high education, people that have studied for many years, their brains are a bit different, but that doesn't mean much. Their adaptive strategies are different. It's not their brains are different. First I defined adaptive strategy. They can solve the same problem but differently. So this is the essential difference between long training, and this training is not only literacy. You could train in martial arts, you could train in sports, you could train yourself in anything, and that helps you to achieve fine cognition as an adaptive strategy. Some of these ideas I wrote in the book, and I'm still writing. We just edited also a volume where Bernard contributed. These ideas are going to be very important to me rather than the classical model of telling language, memory, attention, perception. They will be important, that's the base, but we have to now talk a bit differently. The another elephant in the room is experience. So cognition, when I talk to students, they come from, what is cognition? Okay, memory, attention, they're psychological systems. But what is cognition? It's an experience. How I experience my mind is my cognition. How I feel about it. Do I really feel intelligent or I feel insecure? It's my subjective statement about my own mind. And as we know from philosophers of mind, other people's take on it is pretty irrelevant. That's also very similar to political or social freedom that we seek. That how somebody else views my mind is irrelevant to me, because that can induce conformity. So we are interested in our experience. So cognition is an experience more than how fast and accurately I am trying to dance to the demands. So classical theory is focused on perception action models. Perception is the sensory input of information, and then I have intention and goals, and I'm acting on it if I decide to. But executive control, as we know, has also evolved in the frontal areas to help us to stop actions. But most often that's the loop. Then subjective experiences arise in the whole process, right? There is no human being who does an action without experiencing it. But there is no way in psychology to extract that. Our tasks are not designed for that. Our tasks are for asking the person to complete a series of steps, and we give a number or we measure in time. But the experience is often not measured, but experiences are happening. Like right now we are experiencing one another. I'm speaking, you are listening, and our brains are creating different experiences for us, which will stay with us. And psychology or cognitive science has given a lot of importance to performance metrics. There is a reason why cognitive science, psychology are sciences. So no science today will be valued without the metrics associated with it. If you cannot measure in numbers, it will not be considered good science. Even humanities and social sciences are beginning to put down numbers, like digital humanities, and they are using AI tools. Other things are happening. So okay, let's summarize. So you have cognition as an adaptive tool, you have mind as an adaptive tool, and I told you many variables like literacy, language, cultures, religions, they train you for better adaptive performances. I discarded the classical computational fast reactive side of the cognition that may be there, but it's not something we need now. Maybe we needed it in the 50s or 60s, but with the advent of technology, we may not need that a lot. We need to now go back to the original intent of having a mind. So if I read classical psychologists, Brentano, or people who shaped philosophies of psychology, you will find that, okay, some of that was already there. So there is a new movement in cognitive science, mind-brain science, to go back to the history. That was before. We thought that we could be better performers. The experience is back. How different people are adapting to different challenges is back. All these things. So that you have cognitive science from the 50s, and you have theories that tell you about cognitive systems. All right. So you have also the brain basis of cognition. You have models for memory, attention, perception. We can measure brain activity and relate to brain areas, parietal areas, frontal areas for attention, so on and so forth. Cognitive science has also made some applications possible, particularly in the domain of AI, and also in addressing questions related to mental health, cognitive behavioral therapy, which is popular, other forms of assessments. But we have to have new questions too. So this is a beginning, I think, a new epoch for the mind-brain sciences we are seeing in certain countries. I am aware of India. I am trying to learn about this movement in other countries. I am a bit aware of the Western tradition, but I'm thankful that this is an opportunity for me to learn about other traditions in the Asian context. Now I come to the topic that is currently occupying me for the research. So this word in English, diversity, means, okay, many things. Many things is perfectly fine, because we are born into a planet that has many things. There is no one thing. And the idea actually is not new, but why it is so impactful now? Because human beings find themselves never before in conflict or confrontation, which they did not think would happen, because there are so many views, ways of life, doing things, aspirations. So we need to be in harmony with this change. So diversity research is picking up. And even companies and corporations are investing heavily in trying to understand how human performance can be actually better. Well, I don't know really. I am yet to learn whether your performance is better if you have more diversity or it worsens if you have more diversity. It's a big elephant. I think there's a long discussion is necessary. But diversity is being taken seriously by researchers. This is worldwide, irrespective of culture or country. If you look at the world map, you will find that, of course, socioeconomically there are different zones, and culturally also they are very different. Like India has been an ancient civilization just as China, but we have also many other continents with their different cultural histories. So diversity is an outcome of these cultural histories. It's not a new phenomena. Like India always has had many people, languages, cultures, ideas, ideologies for 4,000 years. China similarly has been a land of diverse views, ideas, philosophical viewpoints. I'm now speaking in the land of Confucius. So similarly, we also have the Western Europe, Americas, and etc. So what I'm trying to indicate, diversity is not head counting, it's not a new thing that I'm surprised, oh my God, there are so many people. It has always been the case, particularly given the migration and the adapting strategies of humans in other cultures. If humans would not have adapted to other cultures, languages, people, diversity would not be there. They would be restricted to certain locations. But we don't see that. And more so now we see big amount of migration for many regions. So we have diversity as an outcome of movement of humans. So naturally cognition is no more studying people in a straight-jacketed way in their places. But cognition is to be studied now as a phenomenon attached to mobility of humans. Right? This is the biggest challenge. How do you explain cognition, adaptive strategy, as a person is moving through these historical currents? He may be aware or not. We don't carry the baggage of history in our minds, but they reflect in the unconscious behavior, right? There is a certain way, I am always an Indian, wherever I am in the world. But I can always also adapt. I can, when I arrived in China, maybe the first evening or two, the food was a bit spicy because Chinese food in India is different, as you would know. So, but then I adopted. And it is no more looking very surprising. I now know the varieties, or I can choose, or I can try, or I can be a bit daring. We also eat chili, but this is a bit different here. So I can be more open. So one element of diversity is that with mobility, it demands openness. And psychology and cognitive science are gearing to study that. I've done some, I'm proposing some new ideas with regard to this that I will come to now. There is a paper that I have just submitted, a theoretical paper. I spoke in the Max Planck Institute for Evolutionary Anthropology in Leipzig 3 months ago. I was invited to speak in a workshop on diversity. But interestingly, I did not find many presentations there addressing diversity, but they were speaking of their own disciplines, whatever research. So, but for 3 days I attended, and I thought, okay, this is the conceptualization of diversity in Western Europe. So then I thought, maybe there is another way to talk about it. In India, post-independence, you have 2 types of people. Upwardly mobile, English-speaking, so-called intelligent, educated, about 15%. The rest of India are not so much that. So what's the difference? These 15% people do not speak other languages than English often. We have studied all of that. They live in a certain way. They don't mingle with the outside world a lot. Their tastes and ideas are a little bit different. The rest of India lives in actual diversity or multilingualism, speaking dialects. India has 1,500 languages, innumerable dialects. So I proposed that within so-called multilingual countries you find narrow and broad diversity. And this is straight an outcome of educational practices and technological adaptation. So you don't have to talk about diversity in a homogeneous manner. Like all of India is not appreciating diversity. So within multibilingualism, multiculturalism, you find two types of people. Now I have provided the cognitive consequences of these two types of people. That's the paper actually. So these two types of these two types of people that represent narrow and broad affiliations can actually display these tendencies. So which, for example, in my studies in University of Hyderabad show that people are extremely English dominant. They don't speak their own languages. So a sizable body of people are English dominant. So I would classify them as narrowly diverse. Their high proficiency in English leads them not to be so appreciative of other dialects and languages, of other aspects of the culture. They are more Western bound, I would say. The other people actually are the opposite. So which means that given your diversity affiliation, you can display a certain kind of cognition in the same culture. You don't have to look outside. That's the take. I think it is nothing new. It is just I am putting it in the Indian context. And I am giving you some variables. My variables are bi-multilingualism, educational status, and experiences, and openness. So we can measure this, like flexibility, executive functioning, we can measure this and we can correlate. And I am developing a diversity questionnaire. It's being standardized by my group. And we are also creating online apps that can track people's experiences throughout the day. And a lot of data of that sort will then tell us if the hypothesis is correct or people are transitioning between two states. This is like two modes. Right? And this has been well established in psycholinguistics and cognitive psychology, like in bilingualism, as Lorenzo would know. There are two modes. So the diversity also has two modes in the same culture. This attracts me because this seems so real. And this is very close to the experience of many people that I talk to. So broadly diverse context and narrowly diverse context. They are essentially what I just explained, that you are in a broadly diverse context where there are many, many types of people with different belief structures, languages, cognitions, strategies, and you are in a narrowly diverse context where people just like you are there. So you don't have to really force yourself to create new adaptive tools. When you create new adaptive tools, when the challenges are too many, each one is pulling you in some direction. And so we have these two distinct setups in India. I will, for example, some of the top universities of India that say would refer to would be narrowly diverse because the selection process has made it narrow and it's very well justified with the criteria. But other universities and the people you find there are the more general population, if you are more narrowly, are more broadly diverse. So these two contexts are detrimental to do any research with human participants. Because so far probably all my research has been on people of this sort rather than that sort. Because it's already filtered. Alright? So if you have a question or comment, I hope that so far I have been speaking coherently. I am getting into my theoretical framework now that would predict experimental phenomena, and I would contradict some of my earlier findings. That 10 years ago I thought, okay, that's how these things are. So what are the cognitive consequences? Cognitive consequence is, if I have a mental state, what it might lead to. Like if I'm angry, I might speak incoherently. Alright? So some authors are beginning to write that, for example, people who travel a lot around the world, they become more humble and they experience more happiness, more well-beingness, rather people who stay in one place. So diversity induces these different cognitive states, high flexibility, life innovation, less inhibitory control, evolutionary need to accommodate. This is broad. That's how we actually have it. But we could not maintain it because of technological, economic forces. But this is the current trend in most countries. So this is the way we are measuring most people, right? All our participants represent this in multiple cultures. In Britain, in India, in France, in Germany. You look at the participants, you will realize that, okay, I am not saying if you measure randomly, you find contrasts too much, but there would be some movement, depending on experiences. Like in bilingualism research, we have an effect of immersion. Like if I stay in China for 1 year, I would undergo immersion. That immersion would change my diversity affiliation. That's something very realistic. So you can measure them through different tasks which we all know, computerized or qualitative. So what leads to diversity, I already told you. In India, a single most variable that leads to narrowness of diversity affiliation is English language. There are other factors very intrinsic to India, like the caste system of India, where traditionally people have been placed in different vernacular castes, which is typical to India. It's not based on economic affiliation, or like the British class system based on elitism, but it's more based on mythology and religion. So that can also induce insecurities and linguistic behavior and problems. And India has mandated the caste system in its reservation policy for jobs and education. So it's not just English language, but there is good correlation between person's caste affiliation and language proficiency and educational performance in India, which also has an impact on social economic life. It's far more complicated than I can convey to you now, but if you search, you will find many nice books. And we have two educational types of schools in India. By the way, Bernard, this is Harrow's school in Bangalore. And the money they take for 1 year would pay the salaries of about 100 people. This is Harrow, a top boarding school of UK, was open. Similarly they're dressed and they are put in nice buildings, not like the Britons in the actual Harrow buildings, but they're trying to. But this is the kind of school that you find across India, where children are sitting down and they're studying, and there is a teacher who is teaching them somewhere on a blackboard. We don't have, but now government has invested in multiple provinces, smart schools, smart boards, like this type of systems we have. So that is a change now, but that change is not a lot. It would take many years of investment, but this is the most common form of education, primary education. So you experience these things in India more sharply if you travel and if you talk to students. You can find it in the university. So you have socioeconomic status, languages, and cognition interacting. So you need to collect a lot more data to understand your tests. So earlier I used to just be blind. I would just track 30, 40, 40 people. Then later on I realized that, okay, maybe the performance is an outcome of how they are experiencing the task. Maybe they simply don't have that strategy. And there's no point in expecting it in the experiment, like in the Stroop task or some task. So I thought of, a lot of my research has been on bi-multilinguals, and I don't have to define it, a person who speaks 2 languages or more freely, fluently. But more important is the environment where this person stays. Like if you are bi-multilingual but you are in a monolingual environment, it is no good, and vice versa. So the environment of India is bi-multilingual, but I told you earlier that some people, 20%, they are actually monolingual. They demand English or they speak in English more than other languages. Because it's considered not so nice if you speak in a vernacular, in a more wealthy or more elite or educated scenario. It's not appreciated. So you can shift. So I have been studying whether language proficiency, English language proficiency particularly leads to executive functioning. A lot of work of Lorenza that he inspired me in the beginning, 10 years before, also was of that type. So she has studied in the European context. and I studied, a lot of my research would show that I have cited Lorenza many times. The idea was simple, that if you speak two languages, maybe you're better or smarter. Smarter in the sense that you can stop whenever you feel like a behavior. So there is a transition from your bilingualism to your general cognition. It's a big claim. This is not well settled, because when you look at the data from around the world, still people are struggling whether it is true or not. So there's a cultural aspect to it. So like for here, I have been studying whether you present, look, you know, these cartoons, and you train people and try to give a story about them. So it's a like interaction. So after the interaction, you do a flanker task. I hope that you know this. Yeah. So we can see an effect of induction of context, and people are behaving differently when they kind of see these cartoon figures later. It's very surprising to me that in a matter of 30 minutes you can see this induction. So it's like whoever you see, you briefly know about them, can influence your cognition in a serious way. So I did a lot of these experiments, and we found good results. So it led my group's interest in studying context and its impact on cognition. And the context for me was bi, multilingual, or monolingual, etc. The varieties of papers we published, or we're in the process of publishing. So some of my students here, I would just like to, JP Singh is now an assistant professor in Allahabad, the university I first started with, so he's in the same department, and he published few papers, nice papers with me. Sima Prasad was a postdoc with Bernard at Dresden, and is still working at Dresden. And I published lots of papers with her in my early, for a significant amount of my career, and she is doing very well there. We just edited a volume of chapters. So what is this? This type of paper tells you that if you speak any language very, very well, but to my definition, that would be narrow diversity, right? So I'm going to interpret this more negatively, that this performance is not indicative of fluent cognition, the way I defined in the beginning, as an adaptive strategy. So you can be faster in a reactive way, you can stop an action, you can be a bit cunning, but it's not actually reflecting cognition that is important for that culture, right? It's something artificial. This is the strange hypothesis that I am entertaining, that reactive cognition is limited in some people, narrow diversity, and more proactive, open, broad cognition we have not studied. So basically we have to study, or we have to tone down the claims we have made on those 10-15% of people. So, but one thing is for sure, that tasks do elicit. I don't want to get into this, how much time I have?
10 more minutes.
10 more minutes. I will allow some time to talk. So these papers are available, and you can just have a look, and I'll just skip this because let's go to the broad context of India. So we have literacy training studies on cognition, which we are still doing, and we also study a lot of varieties of people speaking different languages, non-English bilingualism. Like in China also, you may be bilingual, but not English is not one of the languages. And we have not studied those bilinguals in India. It's high time that we study non-English based bilingualism to confirm some of the claims of bilingualism. But we do, we have to have different techniques because studying English based bilingualism is easy because you find them in the university. For that you have to go outside otherwise. So I have been studying multilinguals who are low literate or no literate. So they don't have formal literacy, but they speak 2 or 3 Indian languages. A very distinct population. All right, so I think the other research that I have been, she will speak a bit more about it. She was involved in an important way. So we have been training these people that never went to school in an urban slum near the university. This is an urban slum. You have high rises, just like over here. And this slum has all the people really poor. They are, you could say the per day earning, yesterday somebody was telling, is about $2. Or maybe less than $2, American dollars. So we set up a training program for 1 year, and they were taught by teachers. We taught them in 2 languages, one their mother tongue, one another language. So one was environmental language, one is the mother tongue. We wanted to examine whether cognition changes after 1 year as a function of training. So the final analysis we are still doing. I just presented briefly to a review committee, but the results are encouraging. So the expectation was we are teaching them reading and writing, right? It's very difficult for people that are 45, 50, 60 to learn reading and writing. The brain has become a bit slower and they're not finding motivation. Why should I? So they kept asking me, why don't you teach me English and computers? Why are you teaching me my own script? It has value. I said, okay, you do it this time, next time I put money for English. So I promised them. So the outcome, the prediction is that people that pick up with motivation 8-9 months of training 2 scripts are going to be better in some aspects of cognition than people given the same conditions did not pick up. If literacy indeed has an impact on cognition. So we measured a battery of tasks. We found as predicted that people who were good in literacy training and they were regular attendance, they were motivated. We collected other video and other ethnographic data. They were indeed performing better on these tasks, which means that it's something else. It's not merely reading and writing. So so we studied attentional orientation in many, in 3 time points. We found that okay, they were performing better. So if you do this kind of longitudinal studies, you have a good idea how psychological changes happen as a function of literacy training or other forms of training. The government of India has been investing in adult education for long, but it has not been, I will say, very helpful, except that they can learn to sign or the government can count them as literate, but it is not helpful in the modern sense. Because today we have all the population, just like in China, on smartphones, and they are using apps for money and for finding out information. But I have a feeling that digital literacy is missing. Digital literacy is different than formal literacy. So you can be digitally literate but formally literate. So which is probably is important for India because we cannot put them in schools for years. And there's no point in motivating a 50-year-old that he's not going to read a fiction. But digital literacy is important for his life because misinformation, misunderstanding, or mental health issues related to heavy use of internet are consequence of not understanding digital literacy very well. How much time they should spend, or how much time they should spend in other kind of, or what is information, or reading and writing. So I think my next project, if I have good funding, they're all funding intensive projects, because I have to have a group of 10 people to do this, is to study the impact of digital literacy and adaptive strategies in people that are really poor, because other people have picked it up and they're fine. So we have been doing lots of tasks. The tasks are on the site. I won't get into that. The findings are very encouraging. So we find that there are 2 findings have emerged, that some of the people that really did very well in the training, 8 months, they were the ones to show better performance on the cognitive task as well as the linguistic task. Like this is a visual world eye tracking task. I can explain later if you would like to know what it is. So we present orthographies to illiterate people, these people that we train, and we put a spoken word, and immediately they look at the related word, which means earlier they were not able to do that, but by training, the networks have got activated so they can quickly orient attention to something that is related. And this is a significant finding, which has practical applications. Like how they look at a political billboard or advertisement, how they appreciate something visually that is in front of them, because in societies like India, money is visual depiction of phenomena, because there is absolutely enormous investment in making the environment visually as attractive as possible. And I once attended, I remember, a meeting by a high-ranking in Delhi. They called me, this was the secretary to the Information Broadcasting Ministry. And the secretary told me, other group of people, experts, that can you find ways to make sure that most people are getting the advertisements? I said, like what? So when I presented this, he didn't, he said, oh, but this is your research, but can you give me something? I'm in a hurry, like next year. So this was, I'm talking about 5 years ago. Can you put something, or can you read their minds so that I can, whatever we put in there, wherever they get it, the message is direct. I said, we have not yet come to that stage, but certainly it can be done. So they gave us some money to study. So the impact of advertisement, social, political, it's not always bad. It's about also healthcare, other, lots of socially driven advertisement are not properly consumed by the people for whom they are meant. So it's a loss. So we can do a lot actually in usability, social advertisement research. How people are really channelizing their attention. If you crowd the place too much, they don't get it. If you put information in a certain manner, it's also, so how the illiterate mind is understanding the visual complexity, sounds, and now there is 3D advertisement, as many. All right, so I started with a definition, then I gave you 2 types of examples, literacy and bilingualism. I always am open to collaborate. If you would like to collaborate and work together in understanding these problems. I'm quite sure the problems are similar a bit to this country as well, but I have to learn and read actual papers coming from China or other Asian countries. I know research from Singapore, from Philippines and South Korea. So it can enhance cognition, but not in the way classical. So literacy is not outside the forces of culture. Why somebody would like to read and write? How long? With new gadgets or not? Because government is now emphasizing smart boards, smart tools, AI-based apps. These are the new ways. So we can't teach them in the old way, because their children are all heavily invested with the internet. So you can see that there is a big change in the strategy at home. So we have to take that. All right. Now for the future, I think later I have to talk a bit, but 2 things. I reserve some of these comments for a later discussion, maybe with Bernard, but just to give you a preview, that are we in the right track? I say, yeah. We cannot be so sure what's happening currently in psychology or mental or cognitive science. We have contradictory poles. We want to have technology, we also have mental health, and we also have the alienation of the self, because this was James's main question. Psychology is all about knowing who you are, in all its bizarreness or goodness. There is no such thing like a good behavior. So I am bringing back James or other thinkers just to see whether we are in the current direction with the struggle with technology, because India has not many problems, just like maybe other countries, with regard to the advent and heavy use of technology, particularly computer-based technology. Mental health, I saw this building also has research in mental health, the gene and the biology of mental health, which is now people are clustered together in networks, so it is no longer small groups of people, but influences are across stratas, and just a little bit of information can create a ripple effect, and many people are becoming involved, and they are attached to that. So we never studied collective psychology in that sense, but now time has come to study collective psychology, because its information is flowing through a collective, like Facebook or Twitter or any kind of information that are being put by people targeting a collective, like we see. So this all will need to be absorbed into the research programs. I have mentioned this, that society has changed as a function of migration, rapid industrialization, heavy demands on digital literacy and cultural assimilation, and societal policies, governmental policies are heavily invested towards these challenges. So we are at a crossroad, but this will just go on. It has always been like that. So each epoch and people view their problems as unique, but I think people in the 30s or 40s of America or elsewhere also look their problems as unique, and a lot of the scientific, the psychological discoveries of that time are indeed a reaction of people to their environment. So it is not that they really did for us, but they were doing it for themselves. So our theories are about us now. We have to find our ways and create psychological cognitive science theories to solve our problems. So I think I will not just read it off. The slides I have given to Lorenza, and she can give to students. If I'll just try to. Some of my laboratory scenes are here. We have some eye trackers and other machines. We have a similar room for video-based meetings with other groups. If there will be opportunity, my group can talk to your group more in a direct way, live. So we have a group of about 10 to 12 people, master students, PhD students, interns, others. I have written some books, and I'm very interested in writing my ideas in a large canvas, because I think some of the ideas cannot be captured in articles. These books are just available for your reading if you find them on Amazon or other sources. I thank, so that's the end of my lecture. I thank Bernard and Lorenza for the kind invitation. I'm liking it very much so far. We have few more days to go, and I am very happy that you were very attentive during the lecture, and I can take some questions, any comments or opinions. Thank you again, and thanks.
Yes, I mean, many of these topics will come back later in the discussion and also in the second talk, I assume. But if there are urgent questions regarding this particular talk, then please let us know. Yes, please.
Excuse me. Thank you, Professor Mishra, for this wonderful report. I just wondering, for the longitudinal study, the 12 months training, so I want to know how old are those children? Because there is a key period for the language development and the development of the cognitive ability. So do you have?
Yeah, they were adults. So they ranged from 18 to 55. A wide range of people. So they were illiterate. They went to school when they were children. So they were grown adults with different jobs.
So they were way past their sensitive period,
Yeah.
which is around 14.
And in my previous studies with colleagues from Europe, from the Max Planck, we have shown that adult neuroplasticity works differently with intensive training. Brain networks change. We have published this in Science Advance 3 years ago. So we have shown that if you train adults like this, 50-year-old, 40-year-old, for 1 year, the attention language networks, they reconnect differently. So what you were saying, the critical period of language development for a child is 7 to 8 years, but it doesn't probably stop once you start interfering even at an advanced age, like adults learn foreign languages. So it's possible. But they were not learning foreign language, they were learning their own language. Not language learning, but they were learning to read and write. Emphasis was on acquiring literacy skills.
I also want to know in Indian, so children learn the second language. They began in school or just in their family? Their father and mother teach their second language.
In India, about 8% of parents teach English or talk English at home, dominantly. But rest of the parents, they don't talk, so the children learn in the school. And 20% of children go to a private English medium school, private. So English is the main language in those schools. So that's roughly the statistics.
Different.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's move to the
Thank
second
you very much.
speaker.